Hi, I'm Effie, the SPC at Tse Chen Ling Center. And on behalf of Tse Chen Ling, welcome to Exploring the Issues of Women and the Feminine in Mahayana Buddhism with Dr. Jan Willis. Dr. Willis's distinguished career as a scholar and an author and a teacher of Buddhism spans over 50 years. I want to let her get right to her talk, so please visit our website for her bio and also more information on the Women of Wisdom series.
Thank you, Effie. So it's really good to see you all. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Okay, lovely. So I just mentioned to Effie before we sort of came on that I have a lot to do well, because I want to talk both about Buddhist literature and talk about some images and narrate some lives. And when I narrate those lives, that will be illustrated. So there's a lot to get into an hour and a half program. And we might have time for Q&A. Let's hope. Okay. So thank you so much for joining me again. I think it's wonderful. I count myself fortunate to have been invited to join this august series, the Women of Wisdom series that Tse Chen Lin is mounting. And it looks great because I saw it before all those people were there, before all those women were there. And so now I see it and it's just blossomed and it's a terrific series. So I look forward to continuing as well. So I want to begin by reading something. The issue of women. Why is it an issue? Is it an issue? Well, most Tibetan teachers will tell you it's not really an issue. But that has to be said is because someone has raised it. It looks like an issue. This is what Kala Rinpoche said. I'm quoting now. Regardless of whether you are a man or a woman, regardless of your particular situation in this life, if you have faith, confidence, and diligence, if you have compassion and wisdom, you can become enlightened. If you are merely caught up in your own emotional confusion and you continue to let that dominate your life, no matter whether you're a man or a woman, enlightenment will be difficult to attain. But if you have the necessary qualities for Dharma practice, the kind of body you have makes no difference at all. Kala Rinpoche. And yet, women having female bodies has presented various issues throughout Buddhist history. And in part, that's because of the cultural context that both India and China have the longest continuous cultures we know about, still existent. And in those cultures, there's always been a bias, I think one could call it, about women and their limitations owing to their bodies. Well, in both India and China for thousands of years, it's been thought and it's been instituted throughout cultures that owing to a woman's body, she was bound. She was not the equivalent of any male body. Why? Because a woman, by virtue of being a woman, had what was called in both India and China the so-called three obediences. A female, a woman, was bound when she was a child, bound by her father, by her parents, but the Sanskrit text always said father. She was bound when mature by her husband. She must be obedient to him. And then she was bound in old age, if she managed to live to old age, by her sons, it was said, not just children. She she always had to have the protection, is the nicest way of saying it, of a male. Oh, so a woman, because of these obediences, it was thought by some, by many, and here I'm moving to 6th century BC India. It was thought by many that a woman could not attain what a male practitioner could attain, even within Buddhism. Now, I hasten to say, does anybody say that in real life? I hasten to say that the Buddha established his community, which was special. It was an intentional community where people would relate to people based on compassion and wisdom, and they would develop those two very essential uh, principles and ways of behavior in an intentional community, his Sangha, his Sanskrit community. His community, the Buddhist community, from its inception, though some would argue, well, it was 5 years later before nuns were added. That's true. The Buddha said in Mahaparinirvana Sutra, my community consists of 4 parts. And those 4 parts were monks, nuns, laymen, and lay women, in that order, because of cultural mores. Males were uh, ahead of women. So monks were ahead of nuns, laymen were ahead of lay women. But the Buddha said, before I pass away, I want all these 4 parts of the community to flourish. So he was clearly, and I often say, the Buddha was very, very radical for his time because he accepted not only um, followers coming into his Sangha from the different castes or varnas, where people had to eat together. And this was very radical in 6th century BC India. But 5 years later, eventually, we don't know, he found it. The nuns order was founded. And then you have men and women practicing this religious practice in the forests, dwelling together. For lots of people in 6th century BC India, that was really anathema, just the thought of it. But the Buddha did it, and so he was quite radical. I say that whenever I get a chance to. But there still remained in much of early Buddhist literature a bias, which at certain points bordered on misogyny, when monks who had recently become monks had to somehow, psychologically, I say, change over their thinking about women. And so we get some texts in the early Theravadan tradition that say women have to be shunned. They are indeed the thing we're trying to get away from. It happens that, especially we'll see it with motherhood. And then with the Mahayana, I hope you keep these things in mind, Theravadan Mahayana. Then the Mahayana, which develops around the turn in the millennia, so several hundred years after the Buddha's dates, we get new schools that have a different view on things. And this new school is going to be based on completely new series of texts, the Prajnaparamita text called a wisdom text, and also a new series of sutra that come out that revalorize the negative images, particularly the negative images associated with motherhood. So first I want to read from early text. I hope that's okay. Just going to read a few. Anguttara Nikaya says, and these words are put in the mouth of the Buddha. Anguttara Nikaya 23:6 says, monks, and I don't want to start with that one. Sorry. Monks, women folk, uh-huh, forgive me. I have them numbered and then I read them and I started reading in the other order. Okay. No man, monks, no man who is possessed of himself should trust women. for they are base, fickle, ungrateful, and deceitful. They do not do as they ought to do. They do not care for parents or brother. They are mean and immoral and do only their own will. Why? Another one. Monks. I know of no other single form, sound, scent, savor, and touch by which a woman's heart is so enslaved as it is by the form, sound, scent, savor, and touch of a man. Monk, a woman's heart is obsessed by these things. Now, one more. Yeah, one more. Monks, women folk in their lives, unsated and unreplete with two things. What two? Sexual intercourse and childbirth. These are the two things. Now, that's pretty biased, right? And that's the old thing is, women give birth. Are they a threat? They can do something men can't do, namely give life. Old Testament, it doesn't matter. There's this bias because of women's bodies. But things in some Buddhist literature, in some early texts, a woman is made a veritable, motherhood is made a veritable symbol of samsara. Because in motherhood, we see continual going. Now, that's taking a negative view of becoming. A woman becomes a synonym for samsara, for everything the early monk is trying to escape from. Okay. So it's particularly important to know two things. One, the text generally got presented more positive images of women as we go forward. And I often want to say to my students, yippee, yay, that's a good thing. And some people have argued with me, well, that's not true because we can still point to these negative portrayals in the Mahayana. Generally speaking, if you did a survey of Buddhist literature, the imaging, the portrayal of the feminine becomes more positive as you come forward away from the Buddha's life towards uh, modernity. Really, as you come from the Buddha's life in 6th century BC to the turn of the millennia, from about 200 BCE to 300 CE, those 500 years, you have this emergence of a new group of texts called wisdom texts, Prajnaparamita texts. And though not all of these texts were written by the famed philosopher Nagarjuna, he's credited with having been the first person to bring these texts from a place that's called the place of the Nagas. Well, that's a place of wisdom beings. The Nagas are these mythological serpentine beings who guard wisdom. So it said that Nagarjuna, he who conquered the Nagas, Arjuna, the conqueror of the Nagas, Nagarjuna lives in the 2nd century CE. So these texts have been around, but everybody says, oh, they came from Nagarjuna. And it's when Nagarjuna went to the underworld and challenged the Nagas and came back with these texts. Well, uh, Edward Konzu did spend his lifetime translating and analyzing Prajnaparamita texts, say that the series of texts, and there are 38 of them, Prajnaparamita texts, probably the oldest one is the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 verses. And so we all probably, you read when you go to congregations or you do certain rituals. You read, for example, famous Prajnaparamita text, really, really short, the Heart Sutra. Oh, or you read the Diamond Cutter Sutra. Hmm. These are Prajnaparamita texts condensed from the 8,000 texts. They're condensed so compactly. And they have a totally new message. Totally new, not so new. The Buddha had talked about shunyata for a long time, and he talks about it in some early Theravadan texts too. But the Prajnaparamita text really emphasize it. Now, it said that Nagarjuna went to this Naga world. Well, it may just be that Nagarjuna went to South India. Nagarjuna's born in the northern regions, but he goes to South India and he comes back from South India loaded with these Prajnaparamita texts. What's happening in South India? Well, there's a Greek community forming in South India who worship the goddess Sophia. Now, I say all this and you say, yeah, sure, coincidence. But the coincidence is measured like this. The Prajnaparamita text in 8,000 is the first Buddhist text that begins with an homage to a goddess. To a goddess. It's the first. And that text says, homage to the lovely, the powerful, the goddess, Prajnaparamita, feminine noun. She's the goddess of wisdom. More about that. So Nagarjuna has this group of texts. He writes a text in verse called a Mula Madhyamaka Karikas, 70 verses about shunyata. 70 verses distilled from the Prajnaparamita text in 125,000 shloka, the Prajnaparamita text in 8,000 shloka, the Prajnaparamita text in 100,000 shloka, the Prajnaparamita text in 300 shloka, which is the Diamond Sutra, the Prajnaparamita text in 14 lines, which is the Heart Sutra. They got compressed, they got condensed. But what happens in those texts is, one, the emphasis on emptiness or voidness, all these things, that selflessness. The Heart Sutra says what? Everybody remembers this line. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. Rupam evam shunyam. Whatever is form is empty. And because of emptiness, form arises. Heart Sutra. Well, you got an idea like that. How's that affect how we see females and males? Oh, I'm going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about Prajnaparamita, the goddess, and Tara, the goddess. But for the time being, just think about these Prajnaparamita texts in which they're saying all form is empty, is empty. In the Diamond Cutter Sutra, the Buddha says, the Buddha is made to say, right? He's speaking. Those who saw me by my form and those who heard me by my voice, wrong the actions they engaged in. Me, those ones will never see. A Buddha is known by the Dharma, by the Dharmakaya, should he be understood. And Dharmakaya has no form, the Buddha says in the Diamond Sutra. So then, at the same time, you have these philosophical texts emphasizing shunya, selflessness, selflessness. There is no concrete, fixed form. You have a series of narrative texts, sutra, demonstrating that femaleness and maleness has nothing to do with enlightenment. I say you have a series of texts doing that. 3 in particular, and I can't talk about all of them. Or tell you the details you probably know is some of these texts anyway. These texts are the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra. They're right at the cusp of the millennium transition. At the same time as the philosophical texts are coming up, these narrative texts are coming up. In the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra, that's one. The Lotus Sutra is a little older than that, so it was back in close to the turn, but BCE. Then you have Vimalakirti. Then you have a text called the Sri Mala Sutra, which is 3rd century AD or CE, 3rd century. But what these texts are saying narratively and humorously, some people tried to convince me, and some are funny. For example, one of the key scenes in the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra shows the Buddha conspiring with this man named Vimalakirti, who's a layperson. And the Buddha and he are, through telekinesis, are communicating. And the Buddha says, I'm going to send my monks over to talk to you today. And Vimalakirti says, well, you better give them a good excuse. And the Buddha says, I'll tell them you're sick and I'll send them after you. He says, okay, well, they won't be pleased. And that really happens. The Buddha calls his monks to him. And he calls a group headed by Shariputra. And Shariputra is known as heading the wisdom beings of the Theravada. And another group of monks he calls is headed by Manjushri, of course. Manjushri heads the wisdom lineage of the Mahayanas. So he calls both these groups of monks and he says to them, go and visit my friend Vimalakirti. He's sick. And then the monks become all hesitant and they become fidgety and somebody is sweating, oh, do we have to? Do we have to, Lord? And the Buddha says, what's the matter with you? Of course, I said he's sick. Go see how he is. What's the matter with you? And they admit that the last time that they visited Vimalakirti, he showed them up. What do you mean he showed you up? Oh, he showed them up. So the Buddha says, go see how he is. And they go to the house where Vimalakirti lives. Now, Vimalakirti, whose name means famed for stainlessness, right? He's pure as the pure can be. So what happens in Vimalakirti's house? Well, he drinks liquor. He has a lot of women there. Goddess lives in his house. It's sort of unbecoming in the Buddhist sensibilities. So they didn't really want to go, but they go. Now the goddess living in Vimalakirti's house greets them, both groups of monks, by showering flowers down upon them. So Shariputra and his group enter first, reluctantly, but they go through the door. The goddess showers down flowers and says, welcome. And you see Shariputra going absolutely crazy, trying to brush the flowers away. Oh, this is unbecoming to a monk. This is not good. Get these away. What is all of this? And if you go to the Met, you pass the Frank Lloyd Wright room in the upper anyway, there is a scroll that was drawn, pen and ink, set over the course of 1 year without the Chinese artist ever making a mistake. He tells the story of the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra. This is on permanent display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it's the story, the narration of the Vimalakirti. So you see in one, it's about a 10-foot scroll. You see in one place, Vimalakirti is lying on a couch, just expecting company. He knows the monks are coming. And you see Shariputra going crazy. Get these flowers off. What are these things? They don't belong on a monk's robes, they think. Meaning that the early Theravada wisdom still thinks some things are real and therefore harmful. Flowers, can you imagine? Flowers. This is unbecoming to a monk's attire. And so Shariputra and this goddess will later have a little dialogue. Manjushri comes next with his monks, and she showers the flowers. I mean, they just glide right through. Why? Because in Mahayana wisdom, all things are empty. Not anything is damaging. So flowers fall on the robes. That's cool. That's groovy. And he sails right in. Well, this is part of the the meaning of shunyata as exemplified for the laity. Like they're not some things that are more real or more substantive or more fixed than other things. So Manjushri exemplifies that. These flowers don't bother me. Later, Shariputra and the goddess begin a dialogue, or he begins with her because he's agitated. she sprinkled him with flowers. Who is this woman? So he picks an argument with her. You can go read this. Vimalakirti, Charles Luk translation, Robert Thurman translation. Vimalakirti near there. I'm sure there are plenty online. They get in a little squabble, and to sort of quiet the goddess, Shariputra says to her, "If you're so smart, goddess, why have you not yet transformed yourself out of your female body?" Well, so, boom, close of argument, right? And then she says, "Dear Venerable, I've searched for my female body for the 12 years I've been here, but I have yet to find it. Surely you know there's in Buddhahood, there's neither male nor female." So the goddess in the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra says this explicitly. It's like the Heart Sutra, Rupam Evam Shunyam. Mm. And in the Sri Mala Sutra comes 300 years later, 100 years after Nagarjuna, you get a princess. She's called Queen Sri Mala, but she's a princess. And what does she do? She delivers the sermon as the Buddha. And the question is never raised. Can she do it? Is this a Buddha speaking? Yes, she's a Buddha speaking. You do have the Buddha coming at the end of her sermon saying, well said, still. And what does Sri Mala talk about? For the first time in that sutra, where it's no longer a question, can women practice as well as men? It's no longer a question because she is in the place of the Buddha throughout the whole thing. And what she teaches is the doctrine of Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature. No more questioning this, meaning we all have Buddha nature. Therefore, any being can become enlightened. No longer a question. She speaks as her enlightened self. And then the scripture ends with all the women in her kingdom being converted and next enlightened, then all the children becoming enlightened, then all the men. The Sri Mala Sutra. Okay. All right. And motherhood gets revalorized. The idea that women are unsated by two things, intercourse and childbirth, becomes turned on its head because one, the Prajnaparamita text begins homage to the goddess, the lovely, the beautiful, the compassionate, the mother of all the Buddhas. Mm. She is Prajnaparamita, that goddess, incarnates wisdom itself. And without her as mother, there are no Buddhas. In other words, every Buddha that you'll ever see only became that by virtue of her and wisdom. She is wisdom. Tika. And then there are cults which come up around Prajnaparamita. There are sadhanas which are developed in the Tibetan tradition. Some people, we know the most well-known, the Buddha of Compassion, Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of Wisdom, Manjushri, okay, Taras, the 21 Taras, green and white Tara. I'm going to see them in a minute. But Prajnaparamita, some people, uh, some Tibetans, some people who practice Tantric Buddhism will take the deities as like a medicine cabinet. I mean, you have your discussion with your teacher, and you over some time decide which deity is best to be your idam, the one your mind is bound to, through which you can develop and cultivate best. And that's a pledge you make, and you do that sadhana. Well, some people Some Tibetans uh, only do one throughout their lives. They do Prajnaparamita, and there are different sadhanas of Prajnaparamita. Some are more extensive, but there's one that just has the one syllable, her seed syllable, just ah, mm? And there are some people who say better not to use a medicine cabinet of all the Buddhas. Just go for the wisdom. This is the mother of all the Buddhas. Just go for Prajnaparamita. If you want to read about sadhanas of Prajnaparamita, James Apple is a good one to do it. They're not, there's in Konza, as I mentioned. Okay. But this transformation that you see with the honor that Prajnaparamita text paid to the goddess of wisdom, and this recognition that there would not be Buddhas were there not mother wisdom, is quite dramatic. I'm going to ask you now, Effie, to just begin those slides while I read something. I guess you can see the stack. Maybe you can see the stack of books I have here. My habit. I'm going to read I'm going to read the beginning, the homage to Prajnaparamita. So please just listen to what the Prajnaparamita text in 8,000 shlokas says, supposedly the earliest Prajnaparamita text. It begins with these lines. She is the perfect wisdom that never comes into being and therefore never goes out of being. She is known as the Great Mother. She is the perfect wisdom who gives birthless birth to all Buddhas. And through these sublimely awakened ones, it is Mother Prajnaparamita alone who turns the wheel of true teaching. This Prajnaparamita text tells us that we had better rethink how we conceive of the wisdom that liberates us, the wisdom that sets us free. I hope you can see it is a notion that after 600 years in India gives, I hate to do this, but gives primacy to femaleness, to birth, to motherhood. Okay. I'm going to, all that being said, I'm going to try to now hopefully not switch gears too much, but say that what I've hopefully done here is given a very quick survey of Buddhist literature and talked about the image of motherhood, at least said it as having been early on a negative idea, and that with the emergence of the Prajnaparamita text and the ideas of selflessness, motherhood too is revalorized so that wisdom becomes the very basis, the sine qua non of Buddhahood. She is wisdom itself. Of all the deities, I should have said this earlier, of all the deities that we might do sadhanas connected with certain deities who represent certain aspects, Prajnaparamita alone does not represent. You could say, well, she represents wisdom, but actually, she is the wisdom. In the so these people, these Tibetans who say that they only meditate one meditation, mean that they're not seeing Prajnaparamita as a representation of something. They are trying to realize that she is that wisdom itself. Okay, take a now I want to switch gears a little focusing on some Tibetan Buddhist female exemplars. And I think we're going to end up, I know we are, hopefully, coming back to Prajnaparamita. All right, next slide, please, Effie. Thank you. There is a representation of her, however, um, and this is one of them. Prajnaparamita usually has four arms, so she sometimes just has two, and she's sometimes standing, but she's clearly female. Uh, she's called the mother of all the Buddhas, the holy, the lovely goddess Prajnaparamita, as she is called in the beginning of the 8,000. Oh, she holds the Prajnaparamita text in her left raised hand, and a dorje um, in this depiction. In other variations, and then her two hands in front are joined in meditative posture, but in some other renderings, Prajnaparamita holds where that dorje is in her right upper um, hand. In some renderings, she is holding a sword there. The sword, Manjushri sword, sword of wisdom. So Prajnaparamita text and the sword of wisdom, or the dorje. Oh, tikaha. I'm going to go through that because we're going to come back to it. Next slide, please. All right. Tara. So I don't have a tale on how Prajnaparamita came to be, except telling you about this startling goddess that came from the south with Nagarjuna in those texts. But of the Taras, right? Of the deities that are so well known in the Tibetan pantheon, there's the goddess White Tara and the goddess Green Tara. And then actually from Green Tara, from Chitta Mani Tara, all the 20 so-called 21 Taras emanate. So who is Tara? Well, Tara's many things. She's a Yidam, she's a Sambhogakaya form. We do sadhanas for her. But the two most common forms of Tara are the white Tara and the green Tara. White Tara is, so what is Tara? She's a fully enlightened being. Didn't call her a female, but she's a being, right? It's a Mogakaya, and we meditate upon her, and she appears in this form. She's fully seated as a Buddha. She has seven eyes. You can see she has eyes on her raised palms and outstretched palm. She grants boons, which is what her right hand is doing. You see the eyes there. The eyes are in her feet. So that's four. And then she has three eyes on her face, representing that one saying is she sees the three times in the four directions and she sees every but what do people meditate upon white Tara for? White Tara is said in the medicine case example in this iconography of Tibetan Buddhism. White Tara is worship propitiated. The sadhana is performed in order for one to gain wisdom, right? Because these goddesses are all wisdom beings. But white Tara is worshipped also, especially for imparting good health, longevity, a long life. Oh, now she's a fully enlightened being, white Tara. She's a Buddha. This blue Utpala flower, which blooms at her left shoulder, is a very rare, it's said to be a very rare. Have you ever seen a blue lotus? But this is a blue Utpala flower. Beautiful, Tara. There's another rendition here. Next one, Effie. Yeah, this is even more modern than the one I just showed. But again, the seven eyes, the fully uh, yogic posture, the Buddha, white Tara. Now, keeping those images of white Tara in mind, let's see the next slide where I think there's a green Tara coming up. Oh, yeah. This is green Tara. Well, you've got white Tara. Why would you do green Tara? Well, green Tara is actually throughout Tibetan history most notable. When people say they're doing Tara meditation, they mean this one. Why? Because this Tara, with her leg outstretched, her right leg, right? She's not a Buddha. She is active. She's in the family of Amoga Siddhi, who helps to impart to us, practicing her, what? Capability, ability, never feeling like we can accomplish something. And in addition to imparting ability and capability, Green Tara stands ready. She's often called the Savioress. She stands ready at any moment to enter the world, to intercede in our behalf. There are so many accounts of people you would know, Atisha, Tsongkhapa, uh, other famed teachers in other traditions other than Gelugpa, who at key moments, when they were afraid of something happen, big thing, small thing, well, they wouldn't actually have done a sadhana for a small thing, I guess. Atisha is going to Tibet, for example, 11th century teacher who starts the Sarma schools, the new traditions, right? Atisha's going and there's one, he's met with one obstacle after another. So it's said of Atisha, more than any teacher ever on their journeys to Tibet, Atisha would stop. You know, they'd go a kilometer and something else would occur to him. He'd stop the whole entourage and they'd all do Green Tara Puja. But Green Tara Puja, doing it, got him there. So Green Tara is looked at as being very powerful. She's not only compassionate, but she has said on numerous occasions, I'm always there. I will help you. Now let me say something about Tara's story, whether we're talking about white Tara or green Tara, and especially I want to say green Tara. Mm. The story that we know of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, we may not know the whole story. We may not know how many times Avalokiteshvara is said to have tried to come hither, which is to step into the world of samsara. And each time his head shattered, in myriads of pieces. Why? Because he cared so much about the sufferings of beings that he just couldn't bear it. So Avalokiteshvara did that a number of times. Mm? And each time, the Adi Buddha, the legend says, up in heaven, said, "You're back again, Avalokiteshvara? You couldn't hang again? What is the problem?" He says, "The suffering's just unbearable." So the story goes, that's when Amitabha says, "Here, I'll fit you with 10 more heads than you have." So you get the 11-headed Avalokiteshvara and, and 998 more arms than you currently have, each holding tools that you might need. Now go and see if this time you can help those suffering beings in samsara. So that's sort of the backstory for Avalokiteshvara. Well, even when Avalokiteshvara was so equipped by Amitabha with all those tools, with his vow to help beings that suffered, still he came and seeing the suffering, he cried. His head didn't shatter, but he shed tears. It is said that one of the stories of the origin of Tara is she was born from the tear shed by Avalokiteshvara. From his tears manifested Tara. And I'd say, especially this Tara that you're seeing now, Green Tara, who is supposed to have said to him in some legends, "Don't worry about it, I got you," right? "And I'll help you, Avalokiteshvara. I'll help you. Let's go. Let's go." I can hear Lama Rishi saying, "Let's go." She said to Avalokiteshvara. So she's the capability. She's the. She says, "We've got this. We can do this. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So there are two forms of this story. One says she was born directly from the tear, as though it were singular, that Avalokiteshvara shed. The other says there were so many tears coming from his eyes that they formed a lake. And from that lake, a lotus blossomed. And on the moon disk, on that lotus blossom, was Tara. So she was born from the lake of tears that Avalokiteshvara shed upon seeing the sufferings of being. And whether white Tara or green Tara or any of the other 19 forms of Tara, Tara is about giving us the ability, the power to overcome suffering. Okay, good. Next slide, I think I have another rendering of green Tara. Just one that I like very much. This is actually a gold Tara, but I like it because it shows the other Taras around. It's that special green Tara that Atisha worship. Oh, this is the Tara that's especially worshipped in Atisha's lineage. Beautiful, beautiful. So I just love to see that myself. Okay. Now, let's hold on to this slide for a moment and let me tell you the other story about the origin of Tara. Mm. Why is it that Tara is so popular? Well, a lot of people like worshiping or thinking of or conceiving of or feeling with a Buddha who's feminine. Oh, now, one of Tara's origin stories, besides being directly a part of Avalokiteshvara, who in some texts is called her brother, huh? They are of the same substance. She was born of a tear that he shed. The other account says, once, long, long ago, in a different realm called manifest illumination, there was a young girl by the name of Wisdom Moon. Wisdom Moon was so compassionate naturally that she said Om Mani Padme Hums a million times, it said, after breakfast, a million times after lunch, and a million times after dinner every day. Mm. But the story goes, she was that compassionate, right? She thought of others. She thought of their suffering. But the people in her village said to her, well, if you care so much about being suffering, why don't you pray to be reborn in a male body? Then you might be able to help beings. To this, to this, Wisdom Moon responds, quote, there are many. Oh, first she says to the people who say, pray to be reborn in a man's body. She says, here, inside of her, quote, here there is no man, there is no woman, no self, no person, and no consciousness. Labeling male or female has no essence, but deceives the evil-minded world. Next, she says, you want me to be reborn in a male body? Quote, there are many who desire enlightenment in a man's body, but no one who works for the benefit of sentient beings in the body of a woman. Therefore, therefore, until samsara is empty, I shall work for the benefit of sentient beings in a woman's body. So the the calling upon Tara by lots of people is because she is the first in the literature at least to state explicitly there are many who've attained enlightenment in a male body, but I don't see any who done so in a female body. Therefore, I vow to aid sentient beings from now on in the form of a female. So that was Tara's vow. Tara is known as the savioress, the liberator, the star who looks down on beings who suffer with the promise to liberate them. In addition, green Tara is said to liberate us from the eight dangers. There are outer dangers and inner dangers. Emotional dangers on the inside, envy, lust, these kinds of things. External dangers, lions, floods, prison. I once gave to a group of women in the state prison in Connecticut. I was doing a workshop, and I would go in once a week, and it was good. I mean, it was a scary prospect the first time I went, but then all you had to do to prove yourself to the women that you were okay was show up a second time. If you said you're going to come again, you came again, you were in. And it was really quite wonderful. And because one of the things that Green Tara helps you with is imprisonment, I told them about Tara and we did a little practice session. So I'm sorry if this goes on long. Somebody needs to let me know that. Um, but did this practice, and then the next month, so there was a month on going once a week for 4 times, and then you take a month off. Volunteers did. So then, so after a month, I went back, and one of the women came up to me and she said, "Oh, Jan, Jan, my mother passed away while you were not coming here." And I said, "Oh, Pat, I'm so sorry." And she said, "Yeah." She says, "But the bad thing is, the worst thing was they let me go to her funeral." I said, "That's good." She said, "But they shackled me, much worse than they've ever done here. They put the chains around my waist and around my ankles, and I didn't want my mother lying in her casket to see me like that. But that's the only way they'd let me go." All right, so I'm just saying, I don't know what to say, but I'm feeling so sorry that she had to go through that. And then she surprised me by saying, "I practiced that green Tara, though. You know that green Tara you told us about that we all loved, that mantra? They loved the mantra, Om Tari Tu De Soha, the green Tara mantra." And she says, "But I did that green Tara practice." I said, "You did?" She said, "Yeah, it helped. It helped." And then somebody else of the group of 12 or so said, "Yeah, but we got to do something about that color. I don't know about green. I don't know. We got to talk about green." Okay, next slide, please. Green Tara helps us with our capability to do something, to get the job done. Okay. So I've talked about two goddesses so far, Pragnaparamita. And now I'm going to start talking about actual women in the flesh. Hmm. Perhaps in the flesh. Yeshishogya. Oh. And the three women that I'm going to talk about are separated by, we can say, a century or so. These are actual women in Tibet. Yeshishogya, and think of her as being living around 8th through middle of the 9th century. 8th and 9th century. Then the next person I'm going to talk about, Gelong Palmo, was 10th century. And then lastly, Machik. Machik is 11th century. So they're 1 century apart, but they're amazing women. Yesi Shoya, we might know her as the partner or consort to the second Buddha, Jay Rinpoche, Pema Sambhava, said to be founder of the Nimapa school. Oh, Yesi Shoga. But we wouldn't know about Pema Sambhava, I suggest to you now, without Yeshi Soja. Why? And I say Sojal and Sogyal, and they're just different dialects, right? But here's an image of Yeshi Sogyal. Now, and she has a skull with the nectar, and she's clearly teaching. we wouldn't know about Pema Sambawa without her. Why? Because she was his biographer, because she was his scribe, because everything that we know that about his life, the life and liberation of Pema Sambawa, she was the author of. She wrote it down. Can you see Pema Sambawa wasn't writing anything? I've got here behind me 6 texts. Mm. Uh, Let me call the titles of some. Treasures from Juniper Ridge, Remembering the Lotus Born, um, The Life Story of Pema Sambawa, a different one, Dakini Teachings. These are texts written by Yeshe Sogyal, so we wouldn't know about the life of Pema Sambawa if it weren't for Yeshe Sogyal, who was said to be so miraculous even at her birth that the local lake swelled tenfold when she was born. Not just the rainbows and the flowers from the sky, but life-giving itself expanded when she was born. Yeshe Sogyal is said to have lived 99 years. She lived a long time. She was there. And she famously said to Pema Sambawa, you know, this life is hard. Practicing Tantra in a female form, it's just too hard. If we do okay, the neighbors talk. If we have a little money, robbers come. If we, you know, she goes through this long litany of things that she says it's hard to practice, even harder in a female form. To which Pema Sambawa replies, male or female, doesn't matter. But if she has the will and the determination to have a woman's body is better. And I've often wondered, wonder what he meant by it's better to have it. Why say that? Not just as good, better. It might be something tantric. Tikaha. There are 3 other, let's see the next slide. We might think that when we think Yeshe Suya, we might think of this. Here's Pema Sambawa and Yeshe Suya, Yabyang, the 2 of them, father, mother, right? Um, Tigaha. But next, so Pema Sambawa here, famous, the mustache and so forth. Next slide. But in her own right, Yeshe Suya. This is the cover of one of her books. I thought I would be able to see everybody, but I don't guess the gallery went away. At any rate, I have this book, and I hope you can see that this is the image that I have here. So she was teacher, she was partner, she was biographer, she was all these things. She lived much longer than Pema Sambawa was in Tibet. But it's because of her writings, because she hid Terma, because she and Pema Sambawa together hid these secret teachings to be discovered at a future time, so-called Terma, is she who did that. You can see she has a vase on this one, in addition to the skull cap filled with nectar, a symbol that there are treasures hidden in various places as well. And people still recognize today, there are, Holly Gailey talks about this, recognize that Yeshe Sogyal has emanations present with us today that Tibetans recognize that's Yeshe Sogyal. Okay, just as people recognize she's an emanation of Tara, and they will say of Machik, she's an emanation of Prajnaparamita, that goddess. So these 3, very, very, very important throughout Tibetan history. And excuse me, we begin with Yeshe Sogyal. And I just want to say, as someone who likes books, that we would not know much about Pema Sambawa at all had it not been for her. Thank you. Next slide, please. Another image that shows her in different forms in her retinue, I call it. Here, the skull cup and the dorje. She's the teacher. And you can see her right leg is extended like Tara's. She's an action being. She was in the world. She did these good things. She continues to be in the world. Um, she has, there is a Yeshi Sogyal sadhana series, and there's a Yeshi Sogyal mm, mantra tradition. Okay. Okay. Next one, please. I think we have to go to, oh, Gelongma Palmo originated one of the most ubiquitous rituals, especially for laity, throughout the Tibetan and Himalayan world, cultural world. She is the originator of the practice of Nyunye, that is, the famous fasting ritual, which one undertakes for 2 days or 4 days. Some people do it back to back, back to back, back to back for months. Oh, yeah. She was an Indian nun. Hmm? Some say Kashmiri, some say maybe on the border hinterlands of Tibet. But 10th century, oh, very, very beautiful at birth. All these females, there's much to talk about their beauty. But Gelongma Palmo, um, mm, mm, just as White Tara is that people do a practice of White Tara, not only for wisdom but for long life. Gelongma Palmo and this fasting ritual is a practice that people do. You see, you see the 11-headed, thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara over her left shoulder here. And that's because, well, her story is she was born and she was a princess and she was beautiful. And she became slowly, slowly learned. The family had high stature. She was well educated, but she wanted to abandon the the life of the home. And finally, she was allowed to become a nun. But then her story says, mm, I'm thinking of so much I left out of Yeshe Sogyal's story, but the story of Gelongma Palmo is that she became a nun, and then it said slowly her karma, it said, began to ripen, her past karma, and she became very ill. So while she was young, she was recognized as being extremely intelligent, fast learner. Um, but but at an early age, she started to develop a virulent form of leprosy. Leprosy. It was contagious. It was deadly. It said she became so infected that her skin fell off. And because she lost sensation in her hands and her feet, later, later, even as the disease progressed, even her arms and her legs fell off. Now, two different stories. One story is that she was at a monastery, and one says she was at a monastery, the other offshoot says she was at a nunnery, but whichever one, her disease was kept secret for a while by her close attendant. And one story says she had become abbess, head of the nunnery. But one day it just couldn't be hidden anymore because her body started to smell. And, whether it's a nunnery or a monastery, the ordained people kicked her out. They transported her to the middle of a forest and left her. You say, Buddhists don't do this? Well, according to this story, this is what happened to her. And she called this the lowest point in her life, of course. But she continued to practice. She lost all her beauty. And then there's this, on one story, the Dakinis come to her and tell her to practice Avalokiteshvara. In another, a king's voice comes to her, King Indrabodhi, and he tells her, practice Avalokiteshvara. And she does. She commits in the forest with no arms and no legs, bleeding, to practice Avalokiteshvara. And she does so for 11 years, probably 12. If you're familiar with tantric lore, probably 12. And at a certain point, these Dakinis tell her that she's going to hang in there, keep practicing. And then she has a dream. And in the dream, the 11-headed, 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara appears to her, comes over to her where she's sleeping with a white pitcher, and a pitcher of white liquid pours it from her head to the stumps where her legs used to be. And she woke up thinking she was purified. And when she looked at her body had been made whole again. So she develops a practice for all beings. And this is why lay people especially like it. It's a way to undertake some vows to energize your compassion, because you take these vows owing to wishing others not suffer, right? And you practice Avalokiteshvara for 2 days or 4 days, as I've said. And you fast, taking neither food nor water for the duration of the time that you've committed to fasting. And there are stories after stories after stories of people who have successfully completed these nyunyes, or people who will tell you they've done so many hundreds of nyunyes. I know at Vajrayogini outside of Toulouse, France, every year they practice nyunyes. You can just go there whether or not you're doing the other practices at Vajrayogini. And you can just do nyunyes with one of the monks who's there. He's just lovely. And they have an ongoing week, 2-week, 6-week nyunye practice going at Vajrayogini. And you should know that this is a female who founded a tradition, Gelong Mapalmo, the tradition of nyunye, one of the most popular Tibetan lay and monastic practices. Oh, Gelong Mapalmo, take a high. She was taken back to the monastery, remade abbess, and continued to teach. Take a high. Next slide, please. I think we go into Machik. If you want to learn more about Gelongma Palmo, you can download some stuff that's available by Yvette, I-V-E-T-T-E, Vargas, V-A-R-G-A-S O'Brien, who has been studying Gelongma Palmo for many years and writing about her. Oh, okay. Machik. Speaking of female founders of tradition, here we get to another woman said to live 99 years, Machik, who founded the practice adopted by all 4 major Tibetan schools that's known as chud, cutting off, chud, or also most modern titles, severance. Not the movie, which I have not seen, that. Okay, severance, cutting off. What are we cutting off? Ego. What are we cutting off? Self, attachment to self, right? So this is all still about shunyata, which is basically what the tantras are about, getting us to experience it firsthand so that we can attain liberation. Machik. Her story is very interesting. So she lives 11th to 12th century, 1055 to 1153 or 54. So the story of Machig is that when she was born, she had special signs, right? Not just the outer signs, the rainbows, the flowers, but it was noticed on her forehead there was a symbol, the Tibetan seed syllable, and that symbol was a. Remember when I said a earlier? It's the seed syllable prajnaparamita. That was apparently visible on the baby's forehead, the syllable a. And her mother noticed this, it said, and tried to hide the baby because she thought it was too unusual. But the father recognized, apparently, this was a sign that the daughter was special. Machik's story then says, with family support, she develops very special spiritual gifts at an early age. For example, at age 8, it said that she could recite from memory the perfection of wisdom in 8,000 lines. That earliest Prajnaparamita text. She knew by heart when? When she turned 8 years old. Very exceptional. Okay. At 13, however, her mother died. And it said that she and her sister began roaming about. Now, one could say that Machig was what's called a manipa, a person who recites monies, or a person who is known for recitation of things. They can read and they can write. She could recite Prajnaparamita texts from an early age. Then, so she and her sister roamed around for a while, and then Machik met a teacher named Sonam Lama. Sonam Lama said to her, once while she was reciting the chapter on demons found in the Prajnaparamita text, this teacher, Sonam Lama, said to her, better than reciting the sutra and having a conceptual understanding of it, go to the heart of it, find the experience of it. And she took his words to heart. And she decided that the way to go to the heart of the chapter on demons was by wearing beggars' clothes, associating with lepers and other outcasts, by wandering aimlessly, sleeping anywhere, and eating anything, she might have an experience of emptiness. So her story says. Okay, well, she made strides with the tantric world, and she was once back taking an initiation with this Lama, Sonam Lama. It said that her samadhi was so strong that even though she appeared to be sitting there, her inner body left, rose up, and went some distance and stopped in a tree. That tree, it said, legend says, was bordering a lake where Nagas slept. And the king of the Nagas lived there. And he thought it disrespectful of her to just float up to his tree. So he sends his Naga army to attack her. Little naked inner soul being, white, as like this form is, white and naked, in his tree. He said, you're showing me disrespect. He sent his army. And rather than fleeing the attacking army, Machig instead turns, and this is in the white form in the tree, turns and offers her body as food to those Nagas. returns and offers her body to food. Those who know Chud know this is a part of the practice. It's called feeding rather than fighting, right? Feed your demons. Sultan Alione's book, Feeding Your Demons, and she's expounding her understanding of Chud, right? So, and that left the Naga king offering prostrations to her and saying, all the Nagas will look out for you henceforth. You've won us over because you've shown us compassion by offering your body. Oh, rather than fight, you want to feed us. Good. This becomes part of her practice, you'll note later. Mm. Then she meets Dampa Sangye. He gives her teachings on Shine, on and another technique. And he tells her, quote, confess all your hidden faults. Approach that which you find repulsive. Whoever you think you cannot help, help them. Anything you are attached to, let go of it. Go to places that scare you, like cemeteries. Sentient beings are limitless like the sky. Be aware. Find the Buddha inside yourself. In the future, your teaching will be as bright as the sun shining in the sky. Okay. Now, this was all a magical tale, right? Did this person really exist? Well, yes, she did. An actual human being in the countryside in Tibet. Because at age 24, after having studied for a couple of years with Padampa Sangye, at age 24, it said, Machik having met a young man, Turpabhadra, an Indian yogi who came, he said, to find the special Dakini, who ended up being Machik. Machik and Topa had 3 children, 2 sons and a girl. So this story is interesting because this is quite a mystical, embellished story, right? Legend. But it's about a person who has rich visionary life, right? Who goes to places that scare her, who tames demons, who marries, who's been at a low point in her life, and she has these rich, mystical inner experiences. And after all of that, she marries and has 3 kids. Okay. And then the villagers scorn her. What? Must not have been practicing so well, they say. Children? What kind of practice is that? So then she says, then I was at my lowest point, facing extreme poverty, wandering through various parts of Tibet. And it said, after 11 years of utter poverty, she decided to leave the kids. She left them. She decided to leave the children and Topa and go and found a nunnery, a monastery. And she does that. And she teaches the people who come to that monastery, the practice of Chud. Her children later come, 2 of them, and join her, and they become instrumental in spreading Chud practice, her son and her daughter. Okay. People come to her and they say, after all these years have passed and she's been cast out and she's been looked down upon, she had kids that shouldn't have happened, da, 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 da. She founds a monastery and she's teaching and she gets a lot of followers. Then people say, Machik, this is from the story, had a profound visionary experience in which Tara, the deity of profound compassion, and a host of Dakinis came to her, although Machik claimed before them to only be a foolish and humble woman. Tara told her, you, to Machik, you are the mind emanation of Prajnaparamita, the great mother, the source of all. Next slide, please, Effie. And that's why you see on some renderings of Machik, do you see small goddess in the upper right hand, and it's our left hand looking corner. Who is that? The goddess Prajnaparamita. So here, all I could think to say was we're ending as we began. These five, beginning with Prajnaparamita, then we talked about Tara, then we talked about Yeshi Sogyal, then we talked about Gelongma Palmo. Now we're ending with Machik. All these women, all two deities, three actual women, very accomplished practitioners, all emanations of various sorts of the mother of all the Buddhas, wisdom itself. Okay. Well, I hope the slides helped a little bit. I don't know, but thank you so much. I think I would like to stop and entertain, if you have them, questions I may be able to answer, maybe not. But we do have a few minutes, right? Like 9. No.
Raise your hand, or you can send a question to me in chat if you prefer.
Okay. Effie, thank you so much for doing the slides. Appreciate it. All right. Take a moment. Think of any question you might have.
My pleasure doing the slides. I'll ask a question while people are gathering their thoughts. I
Okay.
was wondering, like, I got kind of lost on the timeline of these women.
Oh, okay.
If you could
Okay.
just clarify a little bit on the timeline.
So Pema Sambawa, right, who uh, Yeshi Sogyal um, helps a great deal. That's one way of putting it. Is 8th, 9th century. He comes, we don't know exactly the dates, but her dates are they cross over into 8, like 853, I think some give as her death date, but she's apparently lived 99 years, which is also a way of saying they don't know how old she was. Right? So people live 99 years, right? Georgia O'Keeffe lived 99 years, right? Uh, and then the Gelong Mapalmo is 10th, 11th century. Then Machik uh, is, her dates are 1055 to 1153 or 54. So she's 11th, 12th century. So they're a century apart, very dynamic women connected by Prajnaparamita, by wisdom, and sort of far out practitioners. Yeshi Sogyal, who said it was so difficult to be a woman, is supposed to have been, she was wandering about and she was raped by 7 men, it said. And what does she do? She blesses them. That scared them. And they vowed to become Buddhist practitioners, and it said they go on to practice. She was remarkable. But she says it's really hard out here to practice at it as a single woman, right? To undertake Tantra. Can you imagine? Roaming from place to place, gathering only with other practitioners, Gana chakras, to discuss their methods and then separating again because they meditated in isolated retreats. Can you imagine in that day and time? It must have been hard. Tikaha. So I hope the dates are okay, right? 10th, 11th, 12th century. Starting with 8th, 9th, then 10th, 11th, then 11th, 12th. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh my
Anyone
God.
else?
Um, Dr. Willis, this is Carol. I just want to thank you. Can you see me okay? There you are.
Now I can.
Ah,
Yes. Hi.
good. I just want to thank you so much for this presentation. And I am curious, these goddesses in their time, uh, were they accepted as equals or even better? I mean, it sounds like they had their power and they moved and changed things, but I'm wondering about their community and whether that still was a struggle being a woman at their time.
Well, they themselves say it was a struggle. Now, you say goddesses. I talked about two goddesses and then three actual historical
That's
beings,
true. That's right. You
right?
actually
And
did. Yes.
those
Yeah.
historical beings say it was quite difficult. They
Yeah.
all say it was difficult. But you have examples there of these solitary, one Yeshe Sogal on her own after studying with Pema Sambhava, practicing Tantra
Mhm.
as a single isolated woman, you know, traveling, wandering from place to place, meditating in caves and crags and wherever you could. Then Gelong Mapamo is an actual nun. She takes ordination, but she gets leprosy, right? And the nuns throw her out. Some say the monks threw her out. Well, at any rate, they threw her out. They dumped her, right? Even though they knew she was helpless. But after she meditated and called on Avalokiteshvara for all those years, common theme in the stories. She says when he first appears, after she wakes up and her body's made whole again, and there's gleaming 11-headed, thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara, she says, "Where have you been all this time?" And in this case, Avalokiteshvara says, "I've been with you the whole time, but you had to get rid of your obscurations before you could see me." In her story, he says, "Just look at my robes with blood and pus from all the years, your leprosy." So it's quite dramatic, the story. The deity says, "I've been there all along, but you had these obscurations to get rid of," right? So, but the determination that they show for practice, you know, she liberates herself from this illness. So it's said through, it's thought in the Tibetan community, she can do the same for you. Mm. She's done this for herself. She's turned all that negative karma to positive karma, and she can do it for you. So, like White Tara, Gelongma Palmo has given us a method that by which we can become healthy and we can live to a ripe old age in good health. Mm. Nune is a good practice. It's something we can each do at our homes. You don't have to tell anybody about Nune. You just take the vow, think of Avalokiteshvara, think of beings, and fast. It's a simple practice. Now, Lama Zopa has a practice, right? Nune. The little book tell you everything you want to know about that practice. Hmm? All right, that's Gelongma Palmo. She invented this practice, just as Machik invented the practice of Chud. And Machik's Chud, it's said that 3 different times pundits came from India to test her. And she was a great debater and she beat them all. But they said, yeah, this is the only practice tradition that originated in Tibet, not India. Hmm? Usually the flow has been India to Tibet, but yours, it's unique. It's yours. It's Tibetan. And the some of you know about Chud. Chud involves the Dharma rule, right? She has as that emblem. Matik has the drum and the bell. And this practice became, it became a lineage that went throughout the schools, whether Nima, Kargyu, Gelug, Sakya. All the traditions recognize Chud as a practice. They also all recognize Nyingma. So these are women founders of practice lineages. And we should know about them, I think. Yeah.
We did have a person that had their hand raised, and then I have a question from the chat, but I think we're just about out of time. Renda, who raised their hand, are you here? Can you unmute yourself?
Randy?
Yeah,
Randy?
yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Jen.
Hey.
just like there's great women teachers today, including you. Lama Tarchin said that there's yoginis in the Tibetan woods and wild places that you couldn't take your eyes off if you saw them. He
Really?
said there were so many of them, all practicing, weird ways and yogic ways. Do you know anything about that? Do you ever hear anything about like modern Tibetan yoginis?
No, but I'd love to go to a community like that, see that. What
I know.
that'd be cool, to see them doing those yogas. But
I
what I
know, because
did, go ahead.
no, we're just saying we're so lucky to have so many wonderful women teachers right now. It's such a fortunate thing for us. But he said, no, man, there's been yoginis in the woods there forever and ever. I guess following the people that you were talking about.
Well, there are two stories that I know about the real practitioners. I always wanted to go to Ugen Tulku's Nagi Gompa, right? But I never did. While we were at Kopan, I never did go up to Nagi Gompa. But maybe 2010, I was in Nepal, and I went up to Nagi Gompa, right? And Urgen Tulku was there with he said he wanted to live there with the nuns, right? There were 300 nuns there at Nagi Gompa.
Huh.
2/3 of those nuns, bright, shiny, smiley, 2/3 of them had done at least one, 2/3 mostly had done 2 3-year retreats in the box retreats. Young, old, they had all done it. And many of them had done it under his guidance. So he wanted to be with those nuns because those were real practitioners. He said, I guess. I didn't ever meet him personally. But those nuns, what a treat. Just go up to Nagi Gompa. They're there. And for them, it's nothing. I had to pull that out of the person that was showing me around. She said, oh, about 2/3 have done at least one, maybe 3-year retreats in the box retreats. But it would be great wouldn't it, to run into a community of practitioners doing the yogas? Incredible. The last thought is that cave in the snow, Tenzin Palmo. That's what she wants. She wants all those women that are under her care to be what she calls tokdens, to be yoginis, not just that they learn Buddhism, which was new enough, that nuns should be taught how to read. They didn't know how to read in Ladakh. The monks finally agreed. They deigned to teach them how to read. But what she's after is all of her nuns to become Tokdenmas, yoginis. That'd be far out. So that was Lama Tarson said that.
I think we're going to have to leave it there.
Well, that's a joyful note. This is Women's History Month. I am so glad that Tse Chen Ling began its Women of Wisdom series this month. Very cool.
And we are so, so happy that we have you as part of this series. Thank you so much, Dr. Jan Willis, and to everyone for being here and supporting our program.
Thank you all for being here. What a pleasure. Here's Annie Lochin.
Yeah, so for Women of Wisdom, celebrating the living legacy of Buddhist women, Tse Chen Ling is proud to have partnered with key organizations whose work aligns with the aims of the series. The mission of the Treasury of Lives is to provide access to Tibetan history and religion through the life stories of all people from the region. However, with such a shockingly low number of biographies being of women, the Treasury launched their Women Initiative, a dedicated effort to better balance the site with the goal of publishing 100 biographies of women over 3 years. For our Women of Wisdom series, we are highlighting one of the bios from the Women's Initiative at the end of each presentation of the program. And we heartily encourage all those attending our events in the series to explore the work of the Treasury of Lives. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Especially thank you to you, Dr. Jan Willis. We appreciate your time so much.
Thank you all. Appreciate you. Thanks for providing the occasion.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sister. Thank you.
Keep well. physically and spiritually. Good to see you.
You too.